Bruce Springsteen is questioning the president-elect's basic competency. I'm Fox News Radio's Michelle Polino with your Fox 411 from La La Land.
The controversy ignited at the moment when the newly elected president, fresh from campaigning on promises of revitalizing domestic industry and protecting national interests, unveiled a series of tariffs aimed at several key trade partners. The tariffs, announced amid a politically charged environment and an economy already brimming with contentious debate, struck at the heart of global commerce. The president's declaration of these tariffs was not merely a policy decision. It was a statement of intent that reverberated across economic corridors and political arenas alike. His move signaled a return to traditional protectionist measures, drawing on nationalist sentiments and a promise to safeguard local jobs at the expense of international goodwill. It was a bold recalibration of trade norms that had been carefully negotiated over decades, and it set off a chain reaction among influential voices throughout the nation. Before we start, smash the like and subscribe buttons for more updates. At the center of this unfolding drama was an icon whose career and public persona had been indelibly tied to the struggles and triumphs of the working class. With decades of music that captured the heartache and aspirations of everyday people, the musician in question stepped forward with a denunciation that left little room for diplomatic ambiguity. His response was measured yet devastating in its clarity and conviction, challenging both the economic rationale and the moral underpinnings of the president's move. The reaction was not delivered through conventional political channels, but through a voice that had always carried the weight of cultural memory, a voice that echoed the timeless concerns of those who toil without the trappings of privilege. The sheer force of his critique was imbued with the authority of lived experience, an artistic interrogation that scrutinized the very foundations of the tariffs and what they represented for a nation deeply divided by class, ideology, and global interdependence. The president's announcement was rooted in a desire to upend established economic policies that many saw as favoring multinational interests over the needs of local industry. Tariffs, which are essentially taxes placed on imported goods, had long been a tool of economic policy in periods of uncertainty or national crisis. The new measures were introduced under the guise of rebalancing trade and reasserting national sovereignty over global markets. There was a robust argument in favor of employing these tariffs as a means to protect domestic jobs and nurture industries that had suffered from years of outsourcing and international competition. However, the approach also raised serious questions about the underlying philosophy of trade in a globalized era. Critics argued that protectionism, while offering short-term relief for some sectors, could ultimately lead to diminished international cooperation, increased production costs for consumers, and a potential spiral into retaliatory measures by affected countries. The president's tariffs were not solely about economics. They were about asserting a form of national identity that was increasingly at odds with the interconnected fabric of modern commerce. Within this charged atmosphere, the musician's response cut through the cacophony of political rhetoric with an intensity that was both unmistakable and profoundly personal. Known for his unwavering support of the underdog and his unflinching critiques of policies that undermined the dignity of labor, his message challenged the very notion that a handful of sweeping tariffs could restore economic balance. Rather than engaging in a tit-for-tat with partisan debates, his intervention was a soulful condemnation of a policy approach he deemed antithetical to the values of unity, fairness, and the shared prosperity of the people. His perspective was informed by a lifetime of witnessing how policies disconnected from the everyday realities of work and struggle could lead to a society fractured along economic lines. The tariffs, in his eyes, were not an isolated political maneuver. They were emblematic of a broader failure to understand the lived experience of millions of citizens whose hopes and aspirations lay beyond the simplistic dichotomy of protection versus free trade. In the interplay between high-stakes policy and passionate cultural expression, it is essential to consider the impact of symbols. The president's tariffs were a symbol of a political moment characterized by abrupt reversals and bold declarations. A repudiation of the long-standing ethos of globalization that had, for better or worse, defined the modern era. In stark contrast, The musician's rebuttal was a reminder that art often serves as both a reflection and critique of societal currents. His refusal to remain silent in the face of policies that risked alienating those who had long been marginalized resonated with an audience that had felt betrayed by the promises of economic security. His stance was clear. Policies that appeared to favor divisiveness, even if cloaked in the language of national renewal, could never justify the sacrifice of shared values and collective progress. His words painted a picture of a country at a crossroads where decisions about trade were inextricably linked to questions of national identity, social justice, and the enduring struggle for an equitable future. Beyond its immediate political context, the event bears significant implications for how economic policies are communicated and contested in the public sphere. When a figure with a storied history in expressing the concerns of the marginalized challenges the decisions of a newly elected leader, it underscores the persistent tension between policy and popular sentiment. The tariffs were crafted with an eye toward reconfiguring trade relationships and reasserting a form of economic nationalism. Yet the criticism emerging from the cultural sphere suggested that such measures might inadvertently deepen divisions rather than resolve them. At a time when communication is instantaneous and the reach of both political messaging and artistic critique spans the globe, the collision between government policy and cultural protest is as much a test of ideology as it is a contest of influence. The musician's response, full of metaphorical power and emotional resonance, brought into sharp focus the idea that the health of a nation's economy cannot be divorced from the spirit of its people. The economic rationale behind the tariffs was underpinned by an appeal to restore domestic industries that had been diminished by unfettered global trade practices. Proponents of the tariff strategy argued that by imposing duties on imported goods, the country could level the playing field for local manufacturers who had long been disadvantaged by cheaper, foreign-made products. In this framework, the tariffs were not seen as punitive measures, but as essential corrective tools designed to protect jobs, preserve industrial capacity, and reinvigorate economic sectors that were critical to national security. The president maintained that such policies were necessary to counteract decades of trade imbalances and to rebalance the scales in favor of domestic production. Yet, this approach came with substantial risks. Economic theorists have long warned that while tariffs might provide temporary relief for targeted industries, they could also trigger a cascade of unintended consequences, including supply chain disruptions, increased costs for consumers, and strained relations with trade partners who might retaliate with their own tariffs or other countermeasures. From an economic standpoint, the debate over tariffs extends far beyond the confines of immediate fiscal calculus. It delves into the philosophy of how nations interact in the age of globalization, where interdependence is as much a norm as it is a necessity for prosperity. The tariffs embodied a pronounced shift toward unilateral decision-making that, while appealing to nationalist sentiment, risked undermining decades of cooperative trade agreements. The musician's fierce rebuttal underscored the inherent tensions in such a strategy, highlighting that a nation's strength is derived not solely from self-protection, but from the ability to engage constructively with the global economy. His critique illuminated the potential disconnect between a policy designed to insulate the nation from external economic forces and the reality that in today's interconnected world, isolation can often lead to stagnation and diminished global influence. In his view, the policy risked sacrificing long-term strategic interests for short-term political gain, a trade-off that could exacerbate economic disparities and erode the social fabric that binds communities together. Integral to understanding the full implications of this confrontation is an appreciation for the deep-rooted relationship between cultural expression and political ideology. Throughout history, art has served as a vehicle for social commentary, with influential figures using their platforms to challenge prevailing power structures and advocate for change. In this instance, the musician drew upon a rich legacy of protest and dissent that has long been part of the national narrative. His artistic heritage, which has often intersected with movements for civil rights, labor reforms, and social justice, lent his critique a weight that transcended conventional political debate. His response was not merely a personal opinion, but an invocation of a tradition where art becomes both a mirror and a catalyst for societal transformation. In delivering his vehement condemnation of the tariffs, he was articulating a vision of national progress that placed human dignity and collective well-being above narrow economic interests. The clash between his values and those embodied by the tariffs revealed a profound ideological rift, a divergence over what constitutes true prosperity and which path best honors the sacrifices and aspirations of the working people. This intersection of political policy and artistic dissent invites a broader reflection on the nature of power in modern society. The president's bold assertion of tariffs was an exercise of executive authority intended to chart a new course in economic policy. Yet it was met with a cultural challenge that questioned the legitimacy of relying solely on top-down mandates to address the complexities of modern economic life. When an influential cultural figure wields his art as a tool for political critique, it reminds the public that power is not the exclusive domain of those who hold political office. Instead, power is distributed across various facets of society, including the realms of art, media, and grassroots activism. This dynamic interplay between statecraft and cultural discourse reinforces the notion that the health of a democracy is measured not only by the efficacy of its institutions, but by the vibrancy of its civic debate. The vigorous response from the musicians served as a clarion call that echoed the sentiment of many who felt that the president's policies were disconnected from the nuanced realities of the populace. His intervention was a striking example of how art can illuminate the human cost of economic decisions, drawing attention to the voices that are often drowned out in the corridors of power. The symbolism embedded in this confrontation offers a rich tapestry of interpretations about the direction in which the nation is headed. The tariffs, for all their technical intricacies and economic justifications, ultimately functioned as an emblem of a political philosophy that sought to prioritize national interests above all else. In proclaiming these measures, the president was inviting the nation to embrace a narrative in which self-reliance and economic nationalism were paramount. However, this narrative was met with a counter-narrative emanating from the musician, a narrative steeped in the belief that true national strength is built on mutual respect, shared sacrifice, and global collaboration. His scathing dissection of the tariff policy was not a simple rebuttal of economic theory. It was an appeal to the core of what it means to be part of a community that values inclusion, fairness, and progress. The event thus became a microcosm of the larger ideological battle playing out on the national stage, a battle in which the symbols of power, identity, and morality are constantly redefined by competing visions of the future. The implications of this high-profile exchange extend into realms that are both concrete and abstract. On one level, there is the immediate economic impact of imposing tariffs on imported goods, a scenario that carries with it the potential for widespread repercussions in global markets. Trade partners may reassess their own economic policies, consumers might face higher prices on everyday goods, and industries that rely on a fluid exchange of goods across borders could experience unforeseen disruptions. On another level, however, the incident serves as a potent reminder that political decisions are never made in a vacuum. Every fiscal directive, every tariff, and every regulatory adjustment carries with it a host of values, cultural assumptions, and ideological commitments that define the nation's character. The musician's fierce challenge to the president's policies was a demonstration that economic decisions are, at their core, moral ones. They involve choices about which segments of the population are prioritized, which voices are amplified, and what kind of future is envisioned. In drawing attention to these underlying issues, his criticism transcended the narrow confines of budgetary debates to speak to the very soul of national policy. There is a transformative power in the act of melding art with political discourse. The collision between the president's protective economic measures and the musician's searing critique embodied a dynamic process in which ideas are tested, contested, and ultimately reconfigured in the public domain. This moment was a vivid reminder that political authority, no matter how robustly asserted, is open to challenge from unexpected quarters. The musician, with his lifetime of experience as a storyteller and a critic of injustice, managed to disrupt the carefully crafted narrative of economic nationalism by introducing an alternative vision of progress, one that placed human values above mere fiscal concerns. His intervention was a demonstration of the enduring role of the artist as a commentator on the human condition, a role that has resonated deeply in moments of national uncertainty and moral reckoning. By questioning the wisdom of tariffs as a tool for renewing national strength, he underscored the complex interplay between economic policy and the lived experiences of the nation's citizens. Cultural influence has long proven to be a formidable counterforce to political authority, and the dynamics witnessed in this instance are a testament to that enduring truth. The musician's refusal to accept policies that appeared to prioritize abstract economic calculations over the tangible needs of ordinary people shed light on a recurring tension within the national dialogue. His message, delivered with passion and clarity, resonated with those who had long felt overlooked by a political establishment that seemed increasingly detached from the realities of daily life. In his steadfast opposition to the tariffs, he not only questioned the efficacy of the proposed measures, but also challenged the legitimacy of a political approach that sought to engineer economic outcomes through unilateral actions. The intense emotional response that his critique evoked served to galvanize public sentiment, emphasizing that policy decisions affect lives far beyond the confines of legislative chambers and executive offices. The ideological chasm that became apparent during this encounter is reflective of a broader debate about the nature of progress and the means by which it is achieved. The president's emphasis on tariffs as a mechanism for restoring economic balance was predicated on a vision of national rejuvenation that highlighted the importance of self-sufficiency and the preservation of traditional industries. This vision, though alluring to a segment of the electorate that felt forgotten by the rapid pace of globalization, ran the risk of oversimplifying complex economic relationships. In contrast, the musician's perspective drew attention to the multifaceted consequences of such a narrow focus. His impassioned stance was rooted in the conviction that economic policies must be carefully balanced with considerations of equity, human dignity, and social cohesion. His articulation of these values offered a counterpoint to a policy approach that prioritized abstract metrics of success over the authentic needs and aspirations of the people who lived and worked within the system. His words, imbued with the power of artistic expression, resonated as a call for a more compassionate and inclusive approach to economic reform. Throughout the entire exchange, the tension between a hard-edged political agenda and the softer, yet no less compelling demands of cultural conscience came into sharp focus. The president's tariffs, with their promise of reviving stagnating industries and reclaiming lost jobs, were emblematic of a political strategy that relied on the simplification of complex economic issues into catchy slogans and definitive actions. Yet the musician's response dissected this simplicity, revealing that the true measure of economic strength could not be encapsulated in a single policy decision. His critique was a reminder that the health of an economy is determined not by isolated regulatory moves, but by the intricate web of relationships and shared values that bind a society together. In his eyes, the move to impose tariffs was symptomatic of a deeper misalignment between political rhetoric and economic reality, a misalignment that threatened to undermine the foundational principles of mutual respect and collaborative progress. By scrutinizing the policy through the lens of cultural critique, the musician inadvertently raised the stakes of the debate to a level where economic calculations intersected with moral imperatives. His evaluation of the tariffs was not based solely on the potential numerical impact on trade balances or manufacturing output, but on a broader understanding of how such policies might reshape the social contract between the governed and those who govern. The critique illuminated the idea that economic decisions resonate far beyond the narrow confines of commerce. They are an expression of the values that a society holds dear. His defiant stance underscored the importance of engaging with policies at a level that appreciated both their practical ramifications and their symbolic import. In doing so, he compelled a reevaluation of the discourse surrounding tariffs, urging decision-makers to consider the human cost embedded in the quest for economic renewal. At its core, this confrontation between a newly elected president and a cultural luminary encapsulates the inherent conflict between ideals and pragmatism that has long characterized the debate over national identity and economic policy. The president's declaration of tariffs was an effort to assert a form of governance that drew on patriotic sentiments and a promise of renewed self-reliance. Yet the response from the musician, the passionate, unyielding outcry against what he saw as a misguided strategy, served as a stark reminder that the battle over national direction is waged not only in the halls of government, but also in the hearts of the people. His words carried the weight of a tradition that sees artistic expression as a means of challenging the status quo, of daring to imagine a future that is more just, more inclusive, and more attuned to the realities of human life. The event, therefore, stands as a testament to the enduring power of art to question and subvert policies that may otherwise be accepted as inevitable or unchallengeable. The implications of this dramatic episode resonate on multiple levels, prompting a critical examination of how economic policies are communicated and contested in a society where cultural icons play an increasingly pivotal role. The bold declaration of tariffs served as a reminder that the assertion of political power, however authoritative, must ultimately contend with the voices that articulate the dreams and discontents of a nation. The musician's vehement criticism, delivered with an undeniable sense of moral clarity, brought into focus the intersection of economic policy and cultural expression. His intervention was not only an indictment of a specific policy, but also an eloquent expression of the broader principle that national progress is inextricably linked to the well-being of its people. By challenging the president's tariffs, he underscored the notion that a nation's true strength lies in its capacity to engage in a dialogue that embraces both fiscal responsibility and the common aspirations of its citizens. In many ways, the clash over the tariffs has come to symbolize a critical juncture in the ongoing debate over the meaning of progress in a rapidly changing world. The president's reliance on tariffs as a means of redefining economic priorities reflects a belief in the power of state intervention to correct perceived imbalances and to reinvigorate domestic industry. However, the response from the musician exposed the limitations of such an approach, revealing that economic policy cannot be divorced from the cultural context in which it operates. His passionate denunciation served as a reminder that policy decisions, no matter how technically calculated, are ultimately experienced by individuals whose lives depend on the delicate interplay of national and global forces. His performance, imbued with both sorrow and determination, articulated a vision of progress that embraced not only the measurable gains of economic revitalization, but also the intangible benefits of social cohesion, respect, and human dignity. The dialogue that emerged from this confrontation between political authority and cultural dissent has profound implications for the future direction of national policy. It presents a scenario in which the decisions made by those in power are subjected to the scrutiny of voices that come from outside the corridors of formal governance. The musician's intervention, marked by an unwavering commitment to the values of justice and fairness, questioned the foundational assumptions behind the tariffs and urged a reconsideration of what it truly means to pursue national renewal. His critique challenged policymakers to engage with their decisions in a more holistic manner, one that recognizes that economic strategies are inseparable from the broader social realities they seek to transform. In this light, the exchange between a newly elected leader and an iconic cultural figure transformed into a powerful moment of reckoning, a moment that underscored the necessity of bridging the gap between policy and people, between abstract economic theory and the tangible struggles of everyday life. The gravity of the situation was made even more apparent by the intersection of economic ideology and cultural identity that the event laid bare. The president's tariffs, designed to fortify the nation against external economic pressures, were emblematic of a vision that prioritized self-interest and unilateral decision-making. In sharp contrast, the musician's impassioned retort illuminated the inherent contradictions in such an approach. His critique reinforced the idea that a nation's prosperity is cultivated not through isolationist policies, but through open dialogue, mutual respect, and the acknowledgement of shared responsibilities on a global scale. His refusal to accept the notion that the well-being of a nation can be measured solely by its ability to shield itself from international competition was a powerful counter-argument, a call for a more expansive understanding of national interest, one that integrated economic vigor with the cultural and ethical dimensions of public life. Every element of this highly charged encounter serves as a reminder of the delicate balance between economic imperatives and the human values that ultimately define society. The tariffs, as much as they were an economic instrument, carried with them an ideological weight that sought to reframe the national conversation about progress and identity. The musician's decisive intervention challenged this reframing, offering instead a perspective grounded in the lived realities of millions. His steadfast dedication to the principles of fairness and equity resonated as a passionate rebuttal to a policy that, in his view, risked alienating those who had long been the backbone of the nation's strength. Through his words and his performance, he called into question the simplistic equation of protectionism with prosperity, arguing for a vision of progress that was inclusive, dynamic, and deeply rooted in the collective experience of the people. In this unfolding confrontation, the event itself has taken on a significance that far exceeds its immediate political or economic ramifications. It is a moment that encapsulates the enduring struggle between competing visions for the future, one that pits a narrow interpretation of national interest against a broader, more inclusive definition of what it means to be part of a global community. The clash over the tariffs and the subsequent cultural challenge was not simply an isolated incident of political sparring. It was a clear manifestation of a deeper ideological conflict that continues to shape the trajectory of national discourse. The musician's response underscored the idea that policies, no matter how well-intentioned from a fiscal perspective, must always be subject to the test of their impact on human life, community cohesion, and the moral compass of a society. By confronting the president's tariff policy with an unyielding mix of artistic passion and moral clarity, the musician catalyzed a reflection on the very nature of power and governance. His intervention served as a potent reminder that the voice of the people, a voice often channeled through art, culture, and shared experience, remains one of the most influential forces in determining the course of national policy. As the nation found itself caught between the competing demands of economic pragmatism and the quest for a more humane, equitable future, the event crystallized a poignant truth: that true national strength is measured not by the imposition of tariffs or the assertion of executive authority, but by the ongoing dialogue between those who lead and those who live the everyday reality of that leadership. The significance of this episode continues to reverberate as it poses fundamental questions about the relationship between policy decisions and the cultural currents of a nation. The move to impose tariffs, wrapped in the rhetoric of self-reliance and protective nationalism, was met with an equally vigorous demonstration of dissent that called upon the timeless values of solidarity, empathy, and resilience. In this exchange, the musician's passionate outcry was more than a mere counter-argument. It was a declaration that the road to true prosperity is paved with cooperation, understanding, and a deep commitment to ensuring that economic policies serve all citizens rather than a privileged few. His response, untempered and resolute, challenged the simplistic narratives of economic revival and instead invited a richer conversation about the ideals that underpin a truly just society. The confrontation over the tariffs, thus, stands as a vivid illustration of the enduring conflict between different visions of progress, a conflict that continues to shape the policies and ideological battles of the present day. It is a reminder that decisions affecting the fabric of society must be scrutinized not only for their economic efficacy, but also for their resonance with the ethical, cultural, and social values that define a nation at its most fundamental level. In questioning the president's approach to restoring national strength through protectionism, the musician echoed the concerns of countless citizens who worried that the pursuit of short-term economic gains might come at an unacceptably high price in terms of long-term social cohesion and justice. This moment, charged with both artistic defiance and political significance, encapsulates the transformative power of cultural commentary in an era defined by rapid change and deep-seated divisions. It is an instance where the clash between policy and principle came to the fore with such intensity that it compelled an entire nation to re-examine its priorities. The reverberations of that confrontation, marked by the intersection of fiscal policy and cultural dissent, continue to serve as a powerful reminder of the enduring need for a balanced dialogue, one that embraces both the imperatives of economic renewal and the vital importance of preserving the human values that create a strong, resilient society. In the wake of the announcement and its subsequent denunciation, the event emerges as a defining moment in the ongoing discourse about national direction and the role of cultural voices in shaping that direction. The tariffs, as an instrument of economic policy, were set against the backdrop of a larger struggle to define the nation's future in terms that extend beyond conventional metrics of wealth and productivity. They symbolized a contested vision of national destiny, one that was met with a countervailing force in the form of an impassioned cultural critique that demanded a reevaluation of what it truly means to foster a society that values its people over parochial economic gains. The exchange between political authority and creative defiance has left an indelible imprint on the national narrative, one that continues to provoke critical reflection about the role of power, the responsibilities of leadership, and the transformative potential of art in the realm of public policy. If you like this video, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel. Also, leave your comments below and tell us, what are your thoughts on Bruce Springsteen's response to Trump's tariffs? We want to hear from you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.